Friends, our gospel reading for today is a courtroom scene. A trial is taking place. Not in the modern sense of a judge, jury, attorneys, stenographers. It was a Roman trial with only two people present, Pilate, the governor, and Jesus, the accused. Perhaps this is the most famous trial in all history. And as you read it, it's pretty clear Jesus is the one on trial. But when you look at it from a reverse angle, you see that no, Jesus is not on trial. It is Pilate who is on trial. The various circumstances of Pilate's life and the life of Jesus and the times in which they lived came together on that day in that courtroom, and Pilate found himself being put to the test. He was on trial. In that perspective, this is not just an ancient story, it's rather one that takes place every day. Life, in a sense, is a courtroom, and you and I are constantly being put to the test in the presence of Jesus and his principles. And the test material, the points on which we are being tried, are essentially the same for us as they were for Pilate. We are, like Pilate, tested as to our personal integrity and moral courage. One of the saddest things as I read this in the life of Pilate is his failure at this point. The man seems to have no deep commitments, nothing that he really believed in, nothing that he stood for regardless of circumstances. We watch as he vacillates over the destiny of Jesus. Pilate knew that this was an unjust thing. He wanted no part of it. He tried every devious means to avoid getting involved. First, he offered to give Jesus back to the Jews. Then he sent him to Herod. Then he offered to trade him for Barabbas. Then he had him beaten in hopes that his accusers would settle for that. And finally, he tried to wash his hands of the whole matter. Pilate did not want to get involved. It doesn't happen as dramatically for us as it did for Pilate, but life does confront us with issues of right and wrong, justice and injustice. And when these moments come, our own personal integrity is at stake. We can close our eyes and pretend not to see. We can close our lips and give consent by our silence. Or we can stand up and be counted. It's a crucial moment when life comes to test our personal integrity and our moral courage. If we start to hem and rationalize, then we're in trouble. And gradually our character is being chipped away. And one day we find that there is very little left of it. Probably there was a time in his life, I can imagine there was a time in his life when Pilate would have found it impossible to participate in the death of an innocent man, but a lifetime of compromise had worn away little by little every vestige of personal integrity and moral courage. But let us not be too harsh with Pilate unless we are absolutely certain that we would not have done the same thing. Remember, to stand on the side of Jesus that day was a very unpopular thing. The most wealthy and influential people were screaming for his blood. The crowds in the streets were screaming for his death. Even his friends had deserted him. If Pilate had chosen to stand with Jesus, he would have been standing alone. And let's be honest, most of us do not like to be standing alone against the crowd. We need to think of that. We need to think of that when we're faced with an unpopular issue. It could be at school, it could be at work, or it could be in the family or in the community. All of the sentiment of the crowd seems to be going in one direction. And yet in the depth of your heart, your moral convictions tell you to go the other way. What do? I remember a story from some years back. There were a group of American tourists who were visiting the Louvre in Paris. And they were conducted on their tour by an elderly guide who had spent 40, 50 years leading groups through that art gallery. And in the course of those decades, he had developed very deep respect and appreciation for the works of art that are displayed in the Louvre. When the Americans finished their tour, a man in the group was heard to say, "Well, I don't see anything so great about these pictures." Typical American. To which the guide responded, "Sir, these paintings are no longer on trial. You are." So it is with the person and the principles of Jesus. He is no longer on trial. In a very real sense, we are on trial. Every day in the courtroom of life, we're measured against those things that he taught and lived. Our decisions, day after day, year after year, mold us into who we are. Those decisions proclaim, much louder than our words, who or what is our King. Our King is that to which we give our allegiance, that to which we are most loyal. Our King is whatever rules in our hearts and in our lives. Amen.